Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Welcome back.
This is season 3, episode number 56.
Wow.
Why do I have to clean the toilets? We'll talk about that here momentarily. You don't have to be a firefighter to listen to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, because Emily and we have an audience that's not just firefighting. But there's something here that I want to hit on real quick is one of the episodes I interviewed Rich Gassaway, who knows quite a bit about situational awareness and decision making under stress. And after we finished recording, and I had met Rich several years back, he said, "I got a question for you, Rick. Why Jersey Rick?" And I said, I grew up in Jersey. And I said, that was a nickname that I got tagged with at Loveland Fire Rescue. And so for those of you who may be new to the show or haven't heard me say that, that's the story behind the nickname
Well,
Jersey Rick.
yeah, and you can take the boy out of Jersey, but you can't take the Jersey out of the boy.
What do you mean? Huh?
Just saying.
Yeah, so our topic today, why do I have to clean toilets? What in the world is a leadership podcast doing with this? So back in January of this year, I wrote a series of short blogs on this exact topic and referred to Dr. Tim Elmore's book, A New Kind of Diversity, making the different generations on your team a competitive advantage. Now, this is not the woke liberal DEI diversity that Elmore is talking about. His book addresses 5 generations in the workplace.
Yeah. So the first generation is the builders. They were born between 1929 and 1945. Then we have the boomers. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that term. They were born between 1946 and 1964. Then, that's funny, Generation X, also known as the baby busters, 1965 to 1982. Then we have Generation Y, or also known as the millennials, 1983 to 2000. Oh, that's interesting. I say it's interesting because I've seen a lot that have said like the cutoff year is like 1996. So I didn't realize it went all the way into 2000. Anywho, and then Generation Z is our most recent one. They're 2001 to 2015. And those really are the ones, the millennials and Generation Z that are entering the workforce
Yeah.
as the baby boomers are transitioning
Right.
out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Emily. And although Tim Elmore does address the builders as the World War II generation, none of them are in the workforce anymore. Now, when I first came in the fire service, they were. We had World War II veterans, Korean War veterans,
Mm.
and Vietnam veterans that were in the fire service and they were out there in the workforce. Um, and Emily just hit on something too about what she has seen for a cutoff year for the millennials. So depending on the sources that you go to, um, I've had the opportunity to listen to Tim Elmore, I believe, total of 3 times on mentorship calls through the Maxwell Certified Leadership Team. I've owned his book, I've read his book, and he's really sharp on this subject. So toilets. Why do I have to clean the toilets? So last year I was having a conversation with a fire department company officer, and he was telling me about a younger firefighter, newer firefighter he had on his crew who questioned, why do we have to clean, or why do I have to clean the toilets? And the officer's response was, because I'm the lieutenant and I told you to clean them. Yeah, there's truth in that statement because the fire service, police department, yeah, it's a paramilitary organization. Although I've heard a couple people over the last year say, "Oh, we're not really paramilitary." Well, yeah, hello, we are. Because there's a rank structure and there's a chain of command. That
Yeah.
makes paramilitary. And that lieutenant was right. That's a firefighter or the engineer's responsibility to get out and take care of those things like cleaning the toilets. That's just the way things are structured in the fire service. And so, however, when I heard him say that, that was his response. I thought, huh, I believe it could have been handled a little bit differently. And so that's what we are going to talk about. So, interestingly enough, that same week that I heard that story, Tim Elmore was on a Saturday morning mentorship call. And I jumped into the queue and I told him about this and asked him the question is what are your recommendations there? And he said, well, he said that's not something that really is uncommon, in that generation. And so he shared an acronym with me called ALEG, ALEG. Now, I want to add before we dig into ALEG that this is not something that takes place at the scene of an emergency. This is non emergency, non critical, where it can actually be explored. When you're pulling up in the rig or the police car or the ambulance and it's happening right now, it's not time to say, oh, it was the house is on fire. Why do I have to pull the hose? Or a
That would be good.
patrolman. Why do I have to chase down the suspect? Or the medic. Why do I have to administer the IV? Yeah, no, those are not times, to explain this. We're
Yeah.
non-emergency.
Yeah, so what does ALEG mean? It stands for A is asking, L is listening, E is emphasizing, and G is guiding. So we're going to break it down. So we're going to start with A asking. What
Yeah,
does that mean?
asking questions. Asking questions of the other party without being sarcastic or condescending. You know, what Dr. Elmore pointed out, when we ask questions of somebody else, it actually makes them feel valued, which is this is one of the things that I've been hearing over the last couple of years. People, in this generation that the ones that are most prevalent now are saying, I don't feel valued. I
Mhm.
do not feel valued at work. And you know what? I subscribe to a weekly newsletter that comes from Gallup to see the surveys that are coming out. And when it comes down to bosses, it comes to supervisors and leadership positions, employees across the board, not only in the United States, but across the world, are saying, I do not feel valued.
Mhm.
Now, for those of you out there who say, well, I'm not going to kiss anybody's rear end, I'm not going to pat them on the rear end, we're not talking about that. Yeah, we are not talking about that at all. We're talking about, people and building relationships and taking the time to explain. So instead of, well, right now, hey, because I'm the boss and I'm telling you to do it, hey, if you don't clean the crappers, then who should do it?
Mhm.
And if the response is back is like, well, you need to be doing it uh, as the lieutenant. Like, well, okay, I have cleaned the toilets. And I'm speaking of myself, I have cleaned a lot of toilets. I was in the military, 2 branches, the fire department. I still clean the toilets here in the house. By asking that is, if you don't, who should?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just simply asking that question.
Yeah. So then the L stands for listening. So let's dive into that one.
Yeah, and Emily, that's genuine. That's genuine listening.
Hmm.
As I think you're going to get an interesting response to that question anyway. Well, who should clean the toilets?
Yeah.
And if it is, well, you need to be cleaning the toilets. It's like, well, good company officers are spending time, in station chores, but not all the time because company officers have responsibilities that the firefighter and the engineer, the driver operator, don't have. They've got administrative responsibilities at their rank. They're writing reports at their rank. They've got things that they need to address and take care of, and it's not always something a time that where they're going to be able to be out there taking part in these station chores. But there needs to be a mix in there. So listening to what that person says, and let them finish without interrupting.
Yeah. And it also includes like not rolling your eyes, not crossing your arms, or any other body language that sends a message that you are only patronizing them.
Huh? Not rolling the eyes? Not taking an aggressive stance, crossing your arms, or even some of, shoving your hands in your pocket.
Mm.
Yeah. And, or,
Or just a breathing, sighing, and
yeah,
frustration.
breathing sign and frustration, or responding back with this duly noted. Yeah. Sarcastic comment, duly noted. Yeah. Yeah.
So then E stands for emphasizing.
So, what in the world does that mean, Emily?
Yeah.
Merriam-Webster online dictionary. I wanted to go to a dictionary, so I just wasn't, shooting off the hip with this. Empathy means the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. So after listening to the response, the your answer, that lieutenant's answer could be, well, I don't blame you, for not wanting to clean the crappers. I mean, after all, I've done it hundreds of times in the military, at home, at fire stations. Hey, cleaning the toilet is not a fun job. It's not. It's just not a fun. It's not a fun job. It's like, I'm sure there's probably some people out there say, "Hey, I don't mind. I don't mind doing it." Well, you probably haven't followed anybody in the firehouse.
Yeah, so the final word in the acronym ALEG is G, guiding. So we've asked, we've listened, you emphasize, and then what does guiding look like?
Guiding essentially is mentoring.
Yeah.
Just taking that time, explaining it. You got, in this case, a brand new firefighter, and who knows? Well, until you ask to find out what their background is. I don't know what the background of that firefighter was. I would say certainly if he was a military veteran, he would understand the concept of cleaning the toilets.
Yeah.
But if he'd never been in that type of environment, uh, that's the opportunity now to discuss the rank structure and that paramilitary environment that takes place in the fire department. Or so, PD. I would imagine, just by the way that you're working in your organization, that there's probably people, paid janitorial services that are coming in, and that you folks don't have to go out, and clean the toilets,
Yeah.
which you're very, very fortunate for that. And as I already mentioned, the officer's role is different. As a battalion chief, the shift commander, we had our office, but we had our bunk room. It was attached to the office. And, I was not always able. Saturdays was, bunk room, bathroom day. And I was not always able to have the time to go in, and clean the toilet and clean the shower, and the crews did it. When I did, I would. And I know that the crews appreciated it. It was the same thing with winter time when it was snowing and it's mucky
Hmm.
outside, and I come back in the command vehicle, and I'd rinse the stuff off the vehicle. In the mornings, we always wanted to turn clean vehicles over to the shift. And there were times, the engine was out on a call, and they come back and, hey, I'm out there, I'm washing, soaping up the command vehicle. They come in, what are you doing? I'm cleaning the vehicle. Well, you don't need to do that. We can do that. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm here. You guys are out on a call. You guys got other things to do.
Yeah.
It's like, just we could jump in as true leaders. We can
Hmm.
jump in and take care of things when they need to be, and not always expect everybody else to do it. There's a mix in there, and a lot of this, folks, is learned. I've been around now a good number of years, and I'm not the same leader now as I was when I was first in the military, my first couple of years in the military.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So guiding is a topic that we've talked about before, and it's also one that has been written about in your weekly blogs that you post, but
Yeah.
it's called mentoring, like we discussed.
Hmm.
So if you're looking for it, look at the word for mentoring.
Yeah, may I add, Emily, I'm working right now with a gentleman, and he's doing some tightening up on my website and with my blogs that are on there. He's setting things up so that you could go in and you could search. You could specifically go in and search for mentoring, and then those blogs are going to come up. So that'll make it easier for the people that visit. And also one other thing that missed saying here is that a response back to the person that's saying why do I have to clean the toilets, go through that is like, hey, yeah, would you want your grandmother to come into the fire station and use a toilet that looks like something along an interstate rest area, or a construction site porta john?
Yeah.
Yeah, most likely not.
Yeah. So depending on the situation and the question, ALEG can be used in either a 10-minute conversation or one that lasts longer.
Yeah, it doesn't. Don't avoid it. Yeah, what we're talking about here in Emily just said, it could be done in a 10-minute conversation. Standing out on the truck deck, with a cup of coffee, after you've checked the rigs and your gear for the day and everything like that. It could be handled, right there, or maybe the thing comes up, during lunchtime or supper time. Leadership is influence.
Mhm.
And company officers, chief officers, you're in a position to influence. And is there anybody listening who wants to be a bad influence? You think about that.
Yeah.
And influence involves communication.
Yeah, and influence and communication can head off a lot of problems before they become big.
Yeah, absolutely. Just communication, and supervisors, leaders, officers, chief officers, the PD side, you know, corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, so forth, like that, is when you could tell when somebody's not comfortable and they have no confidence in their ability in
Mm,
the position they're in.
yeah.
As I worked for a captain at one time that was constantly telling us, I am the captain. No fooling, Sherlock. Number one, it's on your badge. Number two, it's on your collar. And number three, after spending time in two branches of the military and one, the Marine Corps, that knows rank,
Mm,
when somebody's saying, I am the boss, I am the captain, I am the sergeant, I am the chief, there's an issue there.
mhm.
And that needs to be addressed by them going and looking in the mirror and saying, okay, what's going on with me?
Yeah.
I got to constantly tell people that I am this.
Yeah.
And as we're wrapping this up, this episode's a little bit shorter because it's really not a long topic.
Yeah.
Is a leg, it's not touchy feely. It's not touchy feely. As Emily's mentioned, we've talked a lot about mentoring. We've
Mhm.
talked a lot about influence. We've talked a lot about trust. We've talked a lot about building respect. It's not touchy. It's not a touchy feely subject. It's a great acronym. And I appreciate the fact that on that call that Saturday morning, Tim Elmore took the time to explain that to me and encourage me to use that. And my January 2026 blogs have all revolved around, why do I have to clean the toilets? And so you could go back and you could read those. You can go to my website, fireofficerleadershipacademy.com, and go to the tab that says blogs, and you find those. And then also, I've been posting them up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So, Emily, as we wrap up this episode, anything you'd like to add?
I think that's it for now.
Okie
Yeah.
dokie. Well, folks, that's it for this episode number 56, about cleaning the toilets. If you have found this episode useful, please like it and subscribe and share. I've already mentioned my website. That's in the show notes along with my email. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.